Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of The Dating Game with me, Troy Francis, dating coach. Been a dating coach for 10 years, coaching guys all over the planet about how to get better results with women, also advising women on how to get better results with men, because as we know, the dating sphere out there, pretty screwed now. So we all need a bit of help, and that's what this channel is about. It's about deciphering what's going on and giving you actionable advice and ways forward to deal with it. So without further ado, and please do subscribe to the channel, hit notifications. Thank you very much. But without further ado, let's get into the topic because we're going to keep it relatively brief today, an hour or so. And what I want to talk about is basically deluded modern women are making society polygamous. You might even say polygamous, because what we're really talking about here is the fact that women are increasingly dating the same guys. Okay, so you've got this small group of guys, the chads, the top tier, the alphas, the elites, whatever you want to call it. And women are, maybe not knowingly, but women are ultimately sharing those same guys. And then you've got this other bunch of dudes, the 80%. These are very rough figures, but you know what I'm talking about, who are basically not getting anything, or they're having a very hard time of it anyway. Let's have a look at the comments before we start it. To get into this, Abraham Rojas says, I finally turned down notifications, turned notifications on so I can watch your videos live and direct. Thank you very much, sir. Glad to see you here. Marriage causes divorce. Are Chad and Tyrone licking all the ice cream? Again, surely that means that Beta Brian is just going to have to marry damaged goods. Well, yes. I mean, this is the issue, isn't it? This is really this is what we find ourselves up against. So we don't probably even really need a reminder about women's high expectations and why this is becoming an issue. But I mean, for anyone who's uninitiated, in a nutshell, the reason why this is starting to happen is because women's expectations are very, very high of men. You know, they're looking for guys with very high qualities in terms of looks, in terms of height, in terms of finance, in terms of status, you know, all of these different things. And increasingly, they're able to get those guys, or at least they're able to get into contact with those guys and maybe have casual sex with those guys through the dating apps and through things like Instagram. Okay, whether they're able to hold on to those guys longer term is another question, but they certainly have access to them in a way that they never had before. So without further ado, we're going to now, just to remind ourselves of women's expectations, we're going to watch a little clip from the Whatever podcast where Brian interviews some women about what they
well, let's say like a guy that's making, let's say he makes like 6 figures or just like $1 million every year. He's wanting to date down, or he's more willing to date down to it, and he doesn't care about the girl's income.
That's another component.
Like the guy doesn't care how much the
In
girl
the
makes.
finance
Doesn't really care
department.
about how funny she is. Doesn't really care about a lot of shit.
Does the coochie wop?
But I would say that guys will tend to date down.
I'm going to turn up the speed on these things slightly just so that we can get through them a bit quicker. If you think it's a bit too fast, let me know and we can turn it down. But I think we should be okay with this. Sorry, guys. I'm not sure what happened there. Yeah, sorry about that. Talk amongst yourselves, dudes. I don't know what happened there. That is ridiculous. That's really annoying. Just completely lost the... where we were with all of that stuff. Right, here we go. Technical hitch, dudes. Technical hitch. Sorry about this. Why is that not working? Jesus Christ. That is really annoying.
Welcome to the Whatever Dating Talk podcast, where we try to make sense of the modern dating hellscape. Thanks for tuning in tonight.
I mean, basically...
the Whatever Dating Talk podcast, where we try to make sense of the modern dating hellscape. Thanks for tuning in.
That's really, really, really annoying. So sorry about this, dudes. I don't know why. I don't know why that's happening. That's really strange. But basically, so what we're seeing happening here anyway. So Brian goes around the table and he interviews these different girls. And fundamentally, you know, they're looking
Welcome to the Whatever Dating Talk podcast, where we try to make...
They're looking for these top tier guys, okay? So they're looking for guys who are making a lot of money, or a lot of money at least compared to the average guy. They're looking for guys who on average are taller. So they're looking for guys who are 6 foot and over, generally speaking. And those guys, it comes to an incredibly small percentage of the US population, okay, who are actually even over 6 foot. I mean, we tend to think now, you know, everybody, the reality is it's a minority of guys, and particularly when you're getting up to the 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" kind of mark, okay, so there's that. They're looking for guys with high status. They're looking for guys who are, you know, they've got power in society. and so on and so forth. And you know, it is unrealistic. It's unrealistic, and so women are setting these very, very high standards for dudes, and what that is meaning is that there just aren't enough of those guys to go around. Okay, there aren't enough of the guys that women deem to be attractive to to go around. And so what's happening as a result of that is that women are going, they would prefer basically to share a guy who is high value than they would to settle for a guy who's, as you say, somebody says in the thing, Beta Brian, the average dude in the street. They would prefer to share a high value guy than they would to, get into something monogamous with somebody who they don't regard as being of enough value. So this is just so annoying. Sorry about this. But what I'm going to do is bring up the next video that I want to show you. And in fact, actually, do something else here, actually. In the meantime, if you've got any questions, please do put them into the chat. Please do let me know, where you want to take this, how you want it. Right, here we go. Let's get into this. Sorry guys, I don't know what happened there. That was really weird. But yeah, put anything into the chat that you want us to talk about, any sort of direction you want to take this into, and we'll get into it. But I mean, fundamentally, you've got this issue. So now the argument is, and in fact, actually, let's just see how quickly I can do this. Now we've got this situation where women are just basically, sharing the same guy. So on the surface, it's not that women want a polygamous society. It's not that that's what their aspiration is. Okay? That's not their aspiration at all necessarily, but that's de facto what is happening as a result of the conditions that you could argue that women are creating, because they are disregarding the vast majority of men. Okay, so it's becoming just this real problem, and this is why channels like mine exist, because we need to figure out ways around this. We need to address this, basically. Please do give me a like. There's 4 consecutive people in here at the moment, so please, we need at least 4 likes. Really, really keen to push this one up the algo, because I promise you, when we get this video thing sorted out, we are going to be getting into some important points here. At some point, sorry about the technical side of this. I don't quite know why. I don't quite know why this is causing such a problem, but yeah. So the point is anyway that because large swathes of the male population are just being disregarded, what that means is that the same dudes are the same guys who these women are dating. Anyway, without further ado, let's now look at Chris Williamson, who discusses the fact that the number of sexless men has tripled in 10 years. All right, let's have a look at this one.
Tinder and other dating apps be a factor in the rise of the incel movement and young men reporting low sexual activity. So there's a graph here that says the young men, share of men and women between the ages of 18 and 30 reporting no sex in the past year. And that has gone up from 10% to 30% for men since around about 2010 to 2020 to now. Right, so over the last decade, the number of men reporting no sex in the last year has tripled, and the line on the graph has got where Tinder's introduced, and it is exactly when men, where that inflection for men beginning to go from the 10% to the 20 to 28%. Women also.
So isn't that interesting? So it's exactly when Tinder came into play. In around I guess that's 2009 or something, according to that graph, that this differential between these reports of sexlessness started to come in. So Tinder obviously remains really the predominant dating app, although people now seem to be using Hinge and Bumble more. But anyway, Tinder, obviously the most famous and like I guess the forerunner of this kind of dating app, really changed the game. Okay, and you've got stark evidence of this here.
So actually stay flat for a little while, but have increased, which is also very interesting. Wealth in Tinder is not distributed equally. Attractive guys have more wealth in the Tinder economy. They get more likes than unattractive guys. That's the bottom 80% of men, bottom 20% of women, top 80% of women, top 20% of men thing, which a lot of people are familiar with. There's a thing called a Gini coefficient, or a Gini coefficient, which works out how much
I mean, Chris is a decent-looking dude, isn't he? I mean, he was on Love Island. He can't be having any problems on the apps if he even uses them.
Efficiency there is within a system. So it's used to look at economies within countries, and the lower that the number is, the more equality there is within wealth distribution. So if modern dating apps were a country, it would be one of the most unequal in the world. The Tinder economy has a higher Gini coefficient than 95.1% of the countries in the world. It's just below South Africa. It's above Venezuela.
Disparity of wealth.
Yeah, it's above Venezuela and just below South Africa. That's where it sits.
It's quite a funny way of looking at it, isn't it? It's tough out there, guys. It really is. So get on my course, The Edge. Email me, troy@realtroyfrancis.com.
According to open source data, a man of average attractiveness can only be expected to be liked by slightly less than 1% of females, 0.87% on Tinder. This equates to 1 like for every 115 females, and men in the bottom 10% see just 1 match per week at most.
Jeez.
Ultimately, most women only swipe on a handful of men per day, while men are more freewheeling with their swipes. So yeah, females pass on 95% and like on 5, and men are basically 50-50 left and right.
Well, I think, 50-50 maybe on average, but I think a lot of guys will use, or have in the past used, the strategy of just swiping on everything and just hoping that something comes through. People may do that less now because you get penalized by the algo for doing that, right? If you just swipe on everybody, that becomes a problem as far as the algo is concerned. But, yeah, I think absolutely. I think guys are going to take their chances much more than women, who are much more discerning when it comes to this.
I just had a therapy session earlier, so I need a little decompress. That is my top tip for after therapy. Like,
it's just
so we had talked about Tinder before, and one thing that I think is actually really interesting was before Tinder, there were websites like eHarmony. You remember that?
Match.com. Plenty of fish.
And the way that we looked at it, you know, the guys in my friend group, the people my age, we looked at it as like, oh, what a weird fucking idea. Online dating, super weird. You're weird. Like it was just kind of like, what the hell? And then here's Tinder, this fun little swipey thing. It's kind of about hookups. It's a meme, right? It's like a meta commentary. It's just like, this is hilarious. We're swiping. It's hilarious. We match. Oh, what's up? Like, and then almost immediately after that, online dating becomes something serious. It becomes something like, well, I haven't gotten any dates. Let me go online.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. There was a big sea change. The exact date, I'm not sure, but you're probably looking about 2010, 2012, something like that, maybe a bit earlier, when online dating, because I'm old enough to remember when online dating was just a complete no-no. You'd have to be a complete loser to be considering online dating. And now, of course, it's the norm. Now that's where most people meet.
There's really not much resisting to whether it's cool or not. You can resist whether you want to do it or whether it's legit or not, or if the masses are doing it. But if someone says, hey, I'm on Hinge, or I'm on Tinder, they're not going to get made fun of because it's just the masses are doing that. Whereas eHarmony and Match.com, like if you had done that at the time where they were very prevalent for, I think, older generations, it was definitely seen as a weird thing.
That's the same as anything though, right? There's adoption curves happen slowly.
But it wasn't like eHarmony. It wasn't like we all jumped on eHarmony. We all jumped on the hookup app.
There was something about Tinder that made this.
The location services was, I think, the thing. You are in the same location as that person. Here's a picture of them. Do what you want with it, rather than this kind of weird, almost like MySpacey type of AOL vibe to it, which you would get from eHarmony and Match.com. Yeah. Maybe on the Tinder thing, you get this handheld, location services.
Okay, so let's go forward a bit here, see what they say.
That you're less attracted to, right? Like, why would you take the opportunity if you know you can match with more and more and more and more people? You're going to leave out a very large chunk of other people where men apparently do not have that option. So yeah, I mean, they're just chasing after the potential match that they know is more likely going to happen. Maybe if those two people meet, like, this is also another thing. Women and men are now looking at their potential mate through the lens of looks. Whereas before, you might not think someone is attractive until there's some sort of action that makes them attractive. Whether that's someone in your class or someone you go to the gym with or whatever, that interaction is what makes them attractive. And then you're looking at someone who, if you saw their Tinder profile or if you saw their Hinge profile, you would not have swiped. So maybe that's occurring less. Potential mates, like you just had on a guest who said that the worst quality to look for a long-term relationship is looks.
Conventional
And that is-
attractiveness, yeah.
And that is exactly what people are looking at when they get these apps.
Well, I think that this
Yeah, and this is why, you know, we still fly the flag for a cold approach, which is going up to people in real life and saying hello and having a conversation, right? Still flying the flag for that because, and people will always come back at me when I talk about this on X and they'll say, well, 90% of people meet online now. What are you talking about? You're a dinosaur, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that if you actually meet in real life, you tend to get additional brownie points because it's not just this static image of you that conveys, okay, is this guy good looking? Is he my type or whatever? When you meet in real life, there's so much more to it, okay? You're able to convey your personality. You're able to convey something about you. You have a certain energy. You have a certain vibe. That vibe might sit particularly well with her. There are plenty of women who I have dated in my life who would probably not have swiped on me if it was on a dating app, okay? So 100%, this is correct what he's saying, and this is really an argument for why be on the apps, that's fine, but why you should actually be doing some in real life stuff as well.
This probably explains a big chunk of why relationships are now increasingly short, and this is something that people don't necessarily see. So it's easy to say there is now a global sexual marketplace. Anybody with an Instagram account or a Tinder account can basically be in the entire world's sexual marketplace, right? They can be dating somebody in Guatemala or Bali or Germany or wherever they want, and therefore that means that people are mate switching more easily because the friction of doing that is lower, and because the number of competitors for whoever your mate is significantly higher now, and that women will lily pad from one guy to one guy, from one chad to the next one. Now, the thing that Seth Stephens-Davidowitz said that was really interesting is that the algorithms can predict what you're going to click on unbelievably well. They will be able to predict with like insane accuracy whether you'll swipe left or right on someone, and the algorithms can do basically nothing to work out whether or not you'll have long-term happiness and whether a relationship will last long-term. So for the people that didn't see,
and also furthermore, it's not really in the dating apps' interests, is it, to get you into a long-term happy relationship? Because in many ways, you know, they're going to want to keep you on the app. They want to keep you coming back to the app. So you keep using the service, you keep buying extra bits and pieces, bells and whistles, the boosts, the whatever it is, and they keep making money. So the apps are not there to help you find a lifelong partner in a committed, satisfying relationship. The apps are there to make money out of you, and this is how they do it. So in a way, the apps are, if you're looking for something committed and long-term, the apps are actually, you know, against you, really. Let's just speed forward a little bit and see if there's anything else interesting here.
those things were psychological stability, conscientiousness, a growth mindset, a bunch of other things, none of which can be displayed on a Tinder profile. I can't tell whether you've got a growth mindset or whether you're somebody that's psychologically limit set to 6 foot or above for men. That's less than 10%, I want to say, less than 10 or 15% of men in the United States are above 6 foot, and yet height has zero predictive ability when it comes to looking at long-term relationship happiness. Imagine you saying to me, dude, I only date girls who are a size 4.5 shoe. I'd be like, why?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing I was saying earlier about the height aspect of this. I mean, height is now girls will routinely set a minimum height requirement, which might be 6 foot or whatever it is. And for a start, that's, he says, less than 10% of the US population, which is one thing. And secondly, as he also says, is that a predictor for happiness in a longer term relationship? Absolutely not. It's got absolutely fucking nothing to do with it. So, but the point of that and the point of showing you that, and I'm now going to go on to something else because I think we've seen enough of that one. But the point of showing you that is just to really sort of emphasize this point that the women have these high expectations. And furthermore, because they are being facilitated by the dating apps, okay? You know, they're actually being facilitated. It's being made easier by the dating apps for women to get, or at least to appear to get, what they want, all right? So put some questions in the chat, guys, because I'm just sorting out the tech side of things here, but I'm going to show you another video. And then there's a couple of things that I want to address in the chat. So let me just find this. Okay. So there's a great video that we're gonna have a look at here by Psychax in a second, and we're going to talk about this because this is getting to the real meat and drink of the issue now, which is women making society polygamous. But before we do that, a couple of things in the chat. There's fewer people in here today. We need to get more people in here. So please, everybody who's watching this now, like it. We had a few technical issues at the beginning. Apologies for that. But we're up to speed now. So please do like the video. Please do comment on the video. Share this out on your socials. And please do put a comment below as well. It all really helps. It all really helps pull this up the algorithm. We're going to be at 2,000 subscribers on this channel soon. We've grown very quickly, but we can go a lot further, and we're going to be going a lot further, okay? And we're going to be dissecting this dating stuff, and we're going to be taking it all apart, and I'm going to be telling you exactly what you need to be doing in order to get the results you want, okay? So give me the support now, and it will pay dividends, I promise you. So a couple of bits here. So Marriage Causes Divorce says Destiny said that the single most important thing when it comes to dating success is the number of times you cold approach. Agree or disagree? I would agree. And I remember when he said that because it was actually on the show that they did with Rollo and Mike Sartain. So it was compared, or the moderator was Myron. Fresh, I think, was there also. And it was this kind of debate between Destiny. It was when Destiny was doing a lot of red pill stuff. And Destiny, contentious character. He was in that polygamous marriage at the time with Melina. Obviously, a lot of people, whatever. People have their opinions about him. But I think what he said, as far as an indicator of success in terms of actually making things happen in your dating life, I think he was absolutely right. And I made a video about it at the time saying Destiny's actually got some riz, because he actually understands that the more that you go out there and you put yourself in front of women that you find attractive and you interact with them and you seek to make something happen, guess what? The more success you're going to get. Now, he had some data to back it up, which I don't have access to now. We can probably find it, but he was basically saying, actually, if you look at all these other indicators that people think make the difference, like height, like looks, like whatever, actually, the differential that those things make is relatively small. The biggest indicator of success is going out there and approaching. Now, in saying that, did he just mean cold approach? Well, I mean, I wouldn't rule out the dating apps entirely. I think if you're also utilizing the apps, that's fine. But just bear in mind what we've seen in that Chris Williamson video. The odds are stacked against you, particularly if you're not deemed to be in that top percentile of dudes. So, yes, I think the approaches might be virtual or they might be in person. I think he was talking about in person in general. That seemed to be the gist of it. And I would agree with that. Yes, the more you put yourself out there, the more you are social. I mean, all you need to do, really. I mean, Dr. Robert Glover, okay, in his book, Dating Essentials for Men, which I would recommend all guys watching this read. Very, very good. He breaks it down very simply. He says, look, all you have to do is go out there, talk to a ton of women, look for interest, look for high interest, okay, get a phone number, and then take it from there. Try and get her out on a date. It really is that simple. If there's low interest, if she's like, yeah, meh, yeah, okay, I've got a boyfriend, whatever. Okay, fine, no worries, on to the next one. And you just keep going, okay? And the guys that actually consistently do that are the guys who are having above average dating lives. Unfortunately, very, very few guys actually bother to do that because we're all low T and we're all sitting in front of our computers and we're playing video games and eating Cheetos and whatever else, And if you're being out-rizzed by Destiny, of all people, then, I would suggest you might want to take a look at, where your priorities lie. JBB says the apps work very well 10 to 12 years ago. I would agree. They work for me for free. And then JBB says, help people get laid. Absolutely. Any super chats gratefully received. That would be fantastic also. And, okay, right. So I want to now look at this. So psych hacks. This video's been out for a while. I think it's about a year old. But it's very relevant. He says, women are making society polygamous. The surprising consequences of female success. Okay, interesting word there. So let's have a look at what he has to say.
The topic of today's short talk is women are making society polygamous. Now, this is obviously a very provocative title, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't true. And
what a nice jumper, by the way.
I hope to back it up with some evidence and arguments in this episode. I will say at the outset that I don't think this movement is intentional. That is, I don't think that women are consciously attempting to accomplish this purpose. This is an epiphenomenon that emerges out of the data en masse, kind of like how a wave emerges out of the movements of individual particles, none of which are particularly wave-like. None of the molecules has any awareness that it is contributing to the wave, but the wave arises out of the molecules nonetheless. This is the mystery surrounding individuals and populations. The two are obviously connected, but it's impossible to see how unless you take a wide enough vantage. And of course,
yeah, so it's not like women en masse are sitting around going, hey, wouldn't it be great if there was this polyamorous society? Wouldn't that be amazing? And we all want to share guys and hallelujah. It's not like that's happening on a conscious level. What he's saying and what he begins to argue is that as a result of the choices that are being made, whether subconsciously or not, in most cases probably subconsciously, this is the result. The result is an increasingly polygamous society, okay? Why has that done that? because I pressed the wrong button.
Of course, before I lay out my arguments, please be sure to like this episode and subscribe to this channel. It takes less than a second, costs you nothing, and it's also a way for you to be a part of something much larger than yourself. So do the thing.
Creating a podcast or video interview often feels like a never-ending hassle. This changed when I switched to Riverside. With Riverside...
Now, to understand why this is happening, why women are making society polygamous, you have to first understand that women today are absolutely crushing it. While there was a gender gap that clearly favored men 50 years ago, we now have a gender gap that clearly favors women. And in many domains, the size of this gender gap is larger than the size of the gender gap that we had a half century ago. Probably for the first time.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? Because and I really like this guy. I think he's great. I think his channel's great. He's very intelligent. He's very articulate. He breaks this stuff down really, really well. But because of the way that he presents, and you know, he's got his academic criteria, and he's obviously a very articulate, intelligent, quite mild-mannered sort of guy. He's able to say stuff that probably if somebody on Fresh and Fit was saying, they probably get cancelled for it. Although, not that I'm saying what he's saying is not true, but he's able to say these things because of the presentation.
Time in human history, in most Western societies, childless women under 30 are earning more than childless men under 30. Women are graduating from high school, from college, from postgraduate institutions at a significantly higher rate than men. In fact, at a nearly 2-to-1 ratio. They are doing very well. So hooray, women. That said, all this success does come with an unintended consequence with respect to the dating market. And before the women complain, well, who cares about dating? Let me just say that you should care about dating, because unless you want to go back to your father choosing your husband for you, this is pretty much the only pathway to long-term relationships, marriage, and children, which are things I often hear women caring about. So problems with dating will have important downstream consequences. So what is the unintended consequence? In order to understand it, you first have to appreciate that women tend to date hypergamously. For those of you who have never heard this term before, hypergamy is the tendency to date across and up status.
Okay, so we touched on that before, didn't we, basically? And this goes back to the first video I was trying to show you from the Whatever podcast. And then it's referenced in the Chris Williamson thing, which is basically that women, as he says, they date across or up, and preferably up. So they're looking for guys who, by a variety of metrics, are better than them. They're not looking for the chode who's on the same level. They're certainly not looking for somebody who they perceive as on a lower level. They're looking for somebody who's on a higher level, whether that be through looks, money, status, social class, or a combination thereof.
Hierarchies. To put it simply, women want a man who is at least as good as her, if not better. And better, of course, is how women choose to define it, because it's for the cat to decide which milk is good. However, with respect to some very obvious metrics, women tend to marry men who are older, taller, stronger, higher status, and higher earning. And here's the rub. If women are outperforming most men, and women continue to date hypergamously, then voila. You have an increasingly shrinking pool of men that the majority of women would even consider as candidates for dating.
And that's it, isn't it? That is, as he says, the rub. So there's this, because of women's expectations and because of the fact, and that was another thing actually that I didn't mention at the beginning, because women have themselves leveled up. I mean, that society has enabled women now to get to this position whereby they have great careers, they can earn a lot of money, they are very independent, etc., etc., etc. As a result of that as well, their standards have risen, because if you're a woman and you're earning 100,000 a year now, maybe that wouldn't have been possible, I don't know, 25, 30, 40 years ago, whatever, but you are now. Are you really going to date a dude who's earning $40,000 a year or $40,000 a year? Probably not, because that doesn't satisfy that hypergamous aspect of you, right? So that in itself, the societal change as far as women's, situation in society. And listen, I'm not, I'm not knocking it. I've got sisters, great. Do your thing, go out there, be a girl boss. That's fantastic. But it is causing a problem as far as dating is concerned, because the more successful a woman gets, the more successful a guy she is going to be looking for in order to satisfy the hypergamous aspects of her nature.
And dating. And that's bad for women, because fewer eligible men significantly increases the intra-sex competition for a dwindling pool of potential mates. And it's also bad for most men, because most men are just flat out being disqualified from the sexual marketplace. On the other hand, if you are a top 10% man, a top 5% man, wow, is it a time to be alive? And why is that? Because all of these beautiful, high-achieving, intelligent, successful women are competing for you.
And this is why we always say to guys, self-improve, self-improve, self-improve. Because it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it is, yes, the hardest dating marketplace it's ever been. But on the other hand, if you are able to transcend and you are able to get into a tier, or at least to be perceived to be in a high tier as far as men are concerned, which isn't really that fucking hard when you look at some of the competition, then actually there is a lot of abundance out there. Okay, so this is why this self-development message is pushed so much. This is why people, Fresh and Fit and myself on this show, we were talking about this yesterday actually in regard to the Casey Zander video, and there's a nuance to this because you've also got to have that riz, you've got to have that charisma, etc., etc. But I would just incorporate that as part of leveling up, really, to be honest. I mean, as I said yesterday, I think you kind of ideally want to have everything. You want to dress well, you want to get your money up, you want to be in shape, you want to do this, you want to do that. You also want to have some riz. But if you've got all of those things now, it really is a buyer's market as far as that group of men is concerned. And look, it is doable. It is attainable. I'm not saying it's easy, but you can get there. But anyway, that's another issue.
One of a smaller and smaller subset of men. And the men at the top of these status hierarchies are just having a lot of sex with a lot of different women. And this phenomenon is accelerating at a fantastic rate.
This tiny device has changed the way I eat breakfast every day. What is Zoe?
In the last 10 years, the number of sexual partners that the average man has had has remained the same. However, over that time, according to the General Social Survey, the number of men under 30 who had no sex in the past 10 years, in the past year, has tripled from 10% to nearly 30%.
Well, that's a stat that we talked about on here before. This problem, clearly something's happening, right? It's tripled. The number of men who are having no sex has tripled, okay? So something is happening, okay? And something not very good for those men who aren't getting any sex. And it's to do with what he's talking about. It's to do with women's raised expectations, which, as I say, I think are jointly to do with women's own raised status within society, but also the availability of eligible men and eligible high-value men that the dating apps and the internet and social media and Instagram and stuff has enabled. So I think there's this kind of coming together of these two things, this coalescing of these different elements that are creating this perfect storm that we're seeing. And the problem is, as he says, this is accelerating. It's not slowing down, right? It's not like people are taking the Christ pill en masse. This is only going to get worse from here on in.
This means that one in three young men have absolutely zero presence in the sexual marketplace. On the other hand, only roughly 1 in 6 women in that age group reported the same thing. This creates a correspondence of roughly 5 women for every 4 men. And that assumes an even distribution across the remaining participants, which is absolutely not the case. The top performing men are not only having more sex with more women, they're having a lot more sex with a lot more women. So what does this mean? Well, if you put 2 and 2 together, it means that society is becoming increasingly polygamous, in which a smaller and smaller subset of men are enjoying a larger share of the sexual access to all women.
That's it, isn't it? That's it. He says it right there. So basically, these guys at the top are getting more and more sex with more and more women. The other dudes are getting less and less, some of them none. And in effect, de facto, what that means is we are becoming more and more polygamous as a society. Okay, nobody planned it. Well, you could get your tinfoil hats out and get into the conspiracy theories, but nobody planned it, right? It wasn't this intentional thing. It's just as a combination of different social factors and conditions. This is what is happening, okay? This is the new reality. And once again, the antidote to this, if there is one, if you're a guy, is that you want to be getting yourself into as elite as you possibly can. And you want to be learning some riz as well, or learning some game.
To put that 5-to-4 ratio another way, this means that 20% of women under 30 are currently in a polygamous relationship, whether they're aware of it or not. This situation is not conscious or intentional, but the data back it up. And just to be clear, this is not something men are doing. This is not something that men are forcing on women. Why? Well, in the first place, you have to remember that more men are getting less sex than they had 10 years ago.
Exactly. Men don't have the power in the current dating marketplace, in the current sexual marketplace, to, as he says, force this issue. Men just don't have the ability to do it, right? The leverage is all with the women.
So if this is a conspiracy on the part of men, they're doing a really bad job of it. And in the second place, women are gatekeepers of sex. These women are not having sex with a smaller subset of men against their will. It's the women who are functionally voting with their feet that it's either these men or no men at all for me, thanks. And what's the likelihood that any one of these top men who now have historically unprecedented sexual access to women, what's the likelihood that one of these top men is going to exclusively commit to any one of these women? I would say that it becomes increasingly smaller.
Well, yes, and until maybe you get to a certain age and you start to think, well, because the thing that he sort of leaves out here, of course, or perhaps isn't germane to the thrust of his argument, is family, and maybe some of these guys want kids, and in the end, people do often settle down because they slow down over time. God knows I've certainly experienced that. You know, you're not running around like a 22-year-old forever. So, you know, I think ultimately some of these so-called high-value men probably will settle down with one woman. But even then, I mean, there's the issue of fidelity. Will they be faithful, etc., etc.? You could argue many of them won't. And so, in a way, the polygamy continues. It's just happening under the surface. Okay, I'm not making a moral case for that. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's how they should behave. I believe if you are agreed to be monogamous with somebody, you should be monogamous with that person. You shouldn't be messing around. I've certainly learned my lesson on that in the past. However, human nature is human nature, so this is kind of what's happening. But yeah, he's right. Certainly for dudes who are younger and they're not looking to settle down, or they're not at that stage in their life, the chances of them settling with any of these individual women is pretty low, because why would they? If you've got huge abundance of something that you like and you enjoy, why would you not seek to continue to take advantage? I mean, why would you not continue to consume that thing that you really like?
So this is one of the unintended consequences of women's recent success. And what are the solutions? Well, we know that there are several bad or unlikely ones, including reactionary social movements that relegate women to traditional gender roles, or asking women to date and mate with men who are less desirable to them. I mean, neither of those things are going to happen. So to be honest, the best solution that I can come up with is to really support men. Like, to support men with at least as much vigor and enthusiasm as we currently support women.
No, so I agree with him there, because, you know, he said, what is the solution? He says, well, one of the solutions is either turn back the clock, and this is what the Christ pill people are saying, this is what the trads are saying, you know, turn back the clock, make it like the 1950s again, where effectively what we're talking about is policing women's sexuality in one form or another, okay, whether it's through religious edict or whether it's through legal measures or both, okay, so there's that. The second one is convincing women to mate or to sleep with and to get into relationships with men that they just don't find that attractive. And once again, and as somebody who is, you know, I'm making videos trying to help women with dating as well, and it's a very, very difficult sell, right? Because how can you really say to somebody, well, you know what, actually you should be just date lower, just to lower your expectations. And people do say that. People will say that on panel shows, on red pill shows and stuff like that. Say, listen, you know, look, actually, objectively, you are at this level. You should be looking at guys at this level, or maybe even a little bit lower. You know, you're looking up here, but the competition for up here is very, very stark. And maybe as a woman, you know, maybe you don't make the grade, and maybe you should be being a little bit more realistic. You know, you can say that until the cows come home, but you're fighting against biology, and you're fighting against natural, you know, that inner urge that causes her to be attracted to this dude and not attracted to this dude. And it's very difficult to in fact, it's impossible to logically convince somebody to go against their biology, okay? So it's a very, very hard sell. I think what he's saying now about supporting men is probably the best thing that you can say. And I would say it goes in line with my message, which is generally around self-development, okay? And that's what I try to offer on this channel in other content, to be like, okay, well, look, here's the problem. What is the solution? Well, the solution for you, as a guy watching this, if you're a guy and you're having problems with this area, the solution for you is self-improvement, because you've got to get yourself nearer to or into that top percentile, or at least as near to it as you possibly can. Certainly in order to, you know, date the kind of women that perhaps you are aspiring to date. He's finishing now, but let's just have a look.
So that the pool of desirable men continues to grow rather than shrink for many years to come. You can be the judge of how likely that will be anytime soon. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
Yeah, no, I think he's right. I think that male self-improvement, Mark Manson said this, you know, Mark Manson of the Subtle Art of Giving a Fuck fame, and the blog and everything else that he's done. Somewhere he says the only dating advice really is self-improvement and relentless self-improvement. That's really the only valid dating advice that there is. And overall, I would agree, because the better that you can make the product, okay, the fundamentals, then the more likely you are to get up into that more elite level, and the more desirable you're going to be seen by more women. Now, once again, this stuff is nuanced, it's complicated, it's not as straightforward as it seems. It may appear now I'm contradicting yesterday's stream when we were talking about, okay, yeah, but you also need this X factor, you need this Riz, blah, 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 blah. But I'm not contradicting that, because as I said yesterday, I believe you need both. I think that you need to level up in all of these different areas that he's talking about, which are basically looks maxing, working on your fashion, working on your style, working on your money, fitness, blah, 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 blah. You should be doing all that stuff, but also you need to understand human interactions. You need to understand female psychology. You need to understand game. You need to understand applied charisma, and so on and so forth. Okay, so you need all of this stuff. Now that sounds like a tall order, and maybe it is, but it's doable. It's doable. It's not impossible. It just means that it requires a bit of work and it requires a bit of persistence. But you can do it. Please put your comments in the chat. We'll have a look. There's another one I want to show you, but we will go through some comments in a second. But yeah, so I mean, what do you think, guys? Do you think that these people are right? Do you think that the future is polygamous? I mean, it kind of seems that way. And again, I mean, if you asked, if you just went up to a random woman in the street and said, is society, are you looking for a polygamous society? Is that what you want? Most women would say no. However, would most women knowingly or even unknowingly, preferably unknowingly, but would they share what they consider to be a high value man with other women, or would they prefer to go with a dude who's low value, who they 100% know is going to be faithful entirely to them? I would suggest in many cases they would go for the high value dude. Okay, and again, the level of the value is going to determine that even more, because if he's like rock star status, I mean, it's going to be a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it, for many women? I think I'm just going to find. Okay, right. So we've got an old.
So just a few designs that I've been.
We got an Alexander Grace video. I want to show you. I want to show you in a second, but let's just have a look in the chat. So, are women victims of their own success, says marriage causes divorce, or are they now free from having to serve husbands and kids? Well, I mean, it depends what they want. It depends what the individual woman wants. I think the reality is, I think the majority of women actually still do, in the end, want to settle down. They want to find a good man to settle down with. Many women actually do want children. They do want a family. So I think they are victims of their success in that sense, because they're becoming more successful in the material world, but that's making it harder for them to find guys that they would seek to settle down with. And that is a problem, because they've also got the biological imperative, the biological desire to pair bond, have a family, etc., etc. What's the tallest JBB? What's the tallest woman you've ever dated? I don't know. I'm particularly date super tall women. I prefer women I prefer women generally who are shorter than me or my height at most. Let me clarify, really tall women are lonely. Yes, I've heard that could be an issue. I'm good friends with a girl that's 6'3". Yeah, it's tough. I mean, people think women have just got it easy on every count, and that's not necessarily true. It's all Rusty Fuel says it's all designed to benefit cats. Well, that's an interesting conspiracy theory. The Marriage Causes Divorce says the future is serial monogamy, lots of short relationships with guys who have done the Edge 3. Yes, get on board the Edge 3. You still can. It's still time. Email me, troy@realtroyfrancis.com, if you want some actual training in this stuff, not just talking theory, but actually teaching you how to become that elite level dude. With James Tussick, etc. Abraham Rojas says, high value man, of course, it's always been that way. Mothers have been pushing their daughters to find someone who has a good job, who has a good car, and who's able to take care of themselves for decades now. Yeah, absolutely. Nothing new under the sun. It's just that technology has somewhat accelerated and enabled the ability for relationships to happen that may not have otherwise happened. Miguel, where can we find good women who can still believe in family, long-term relationship? I don't know. Go to more traditional countries. I don't know if that's Miguel in. I don't know if that's the Miguel I think it is. If it's in Mexico, sorry, Miami. I mean, arguably go to more traditional countries, but I mean, even those countries now, in many cases, there's a lot of infidelity happening there. There's a lot of divorce and stuff. So I don't really know, to be honest, what the answer to that is. You've just got to go and look for your unicorn, I'm afraid. Would you ever start a business to help all these women looking for a high value man? Would you get lots of customers? Well, look, I mean, part of the vision for this channel is that we help women as well. Okay. And we are doing content that is more aimed at women as well. We'll be talking about, okay, so maybe you want to look at this, maybe you want to consider that. The problems that women face and the potential solutions that they have are very different to those for men, because with men, to be honest, you can really improve your situation through self-improvement of various types. You genuinely can. Okay, there's a lot you can do. With women, because men are very visually focused, obviously, physical aesthetics, that's a big thing. Women can improve that. But then if they're fixated on, well, I want to date this guy who's a CEO and he's got a 12-pack and he's 7 foot tall and he's earning $1 million a month and whatever, then she has to recognize there's going to be competition for that guy. The advice would be, we'll go for somebody who's a little bit lower down the pecking order. But is a woman genuinely going to take that advice on board? I mean, you can't. The feels are the feels, aren't they? You can't logically force someone to feel differently. You can't argue your way out of biology. So it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. But I think a degree of understanding reality is important for all of us. JBB, if I had 5K, I'd definitely go to Colombia or wherever. But you don't have to go to Colombia because we're running an online program. So all you need to do, it's only a few $100s. Email me, troy@realtroyfrancis.com, and I'll explain. But you don't need to come to Colombia. We're doing online webinars and stuff. RJ Flores, what do you think of niche maxing? I see a lot of skinny, effeminate hipster men with hot women who have a similar aesthetic. I think there is a class element to that, especially in London. Look, I think masculinity can express itself in different ways. I'm not really an exponent of you've got to be this like 2D kind of bald, just like hench kind of dude in order to be regarded as masculine. I think it can come through in different ways. If it's working for those dudes, great. I think you've got to play to your strengths, and I think you've got to not try to be someone you're not, if that makes sense. Okay. And I also think that you can still express masculinity. It's not so much about the clothes. It's not so much about, you don't have to be riding a Harley, right? It's not about the cliches. It's about how that masculinity is expressed and the masculine feminine polarity with her. Now, there are, some more different relationships where the men are more submissive and all that kind of thing. But that's not really my subject area. That's not really what I'm talking about. If you're talking about just hipster guys who, like a Harry Styles kind of guy who wears more like effeminate clothing and he's getting loads of girls, great for him. I don't really have an issue with that. There's certainly, there's certainly an audience for that, let's say. Yeah, Flores, with my previous post, there's still a status element within that women are going for, even if it may not seem initially obvious. Well, I mean, look, Russell Brand, once again, when he was younger, I thought he was fairly skinny kind of guy. He dressed in a very flouncy kind of effeminate way, and he was very, very popular with women. So, look, it takes all sorts. You don't have to fall into a specific sort of stereotype. In fact, actually, often if you step out of the box and you've got the balls to present yourself differently, that's actually going to work in your favor. So yeah, different things can work. But that's slightly off topic for today anyway, I would say. I mean, but I don't think not everybody has to be Rich Cooper, okay? Not everybody has to be Andrew Tate or whatever, right? It's not like there's just this one presentation of masculinity, and if you haven't got that, you're fucked. It just doesn't work like that. But you do need to bear in mind masculine feminine polarity. Like the way that I play it, for example, the way that I play masculinity is different to, I don't know. I mean, a lot of other people, right? Like, because I'm coming at it from a slightly different. I'm coming at it from this sort of faux, not even faux, genuine. Like English gentleman kind of vibe. I'm sort of like, I am relatively articulate. We were talking yesterday about intelligence. I'm not foregrounding intelligence. I'm not trying to make her turned on because I'm intelligent, but nevertheless, you know, there is that element to me, but I can also be playful, I can also be flirty, I can also be fun. You know, I'm wearing this kind of stuff a lot of the time. I'm not sitting there in a kind of like a, you know, like a vest and like, you know, with the tattoos out and all that kind of stuff. So I'm playing a certain type of archetype. It works very well for me. It may not work so well for other guys. You've got to look at, you know, what your strengths are, what your archetype is, and play into that, okay? Value and masculinity express themselves in many different ways, and you've got to find something that's congruent with you and your personality. A marriage causes divorce, £2 for the new shirt fund. Thank you, sir. Thank you. That very much appreciated. Thank you so much. That will go to a good home. SJ says, I think it's a psyop. The girls go for Harry or Brand riding Holly weirdos, or Brand riding Holly weirdos push. Girls aren't authentically pursuing him to some extent. Leo as well, but given his status is real. Well, I mean, look, I don't know. I mean, we're getting sidetracked slightly with this. Women, the reality is there's always been a market for somewhat sexually ambiguous guys as far as women are concerned. You've got to look at people like David Bowie, even people like Boy George. You know, it's been going on for a very long time that there is a subsector of women who are attracted to guys who are more experimental with that stuff. Okay, I'm not advocating it. I'm not saying go out there and buy a dress and buy some, you know, makeup or whatever, but it does exist. It would be disingenuous to claim it doesn't exist and it's not a real thing. Okay, it's not that every woman is secretly craving a bloke with a lumberjack shirt and a pig and an axe. You know, like women do have different tastes. There are different markets. Okay. Once more, you should play to your strengths. For me personally, I think the classic, particularly with my age and stuff, I think the classic, you know, more gentlemanly kind of look works quite well for me generally. But you got to make your own choices with this stuff. Anyway, but that's slightly something else. Let's have a look at this Alexander Grace video where he talks about the future is polygamous. Let's see what he says.
There will be a shift in societal attitudes and a powerful movement to normalize polygamy, one man marrying multiple women. I'll go further. I predict that this movement will not be spearheaded by men, but by women. In fact, the right to share a man in marriage and to be one of many wives is going to become a rallying cry of feminism. Right now, that might seem outlandish. A man having multiple wives, that seems like a male fantasy, the ultimate expression of the patriarchy. Why would women, under the banner of feminism, ever push for such an arrangement to become normal? If that seems unbelievable to you, just take a step back and consider how much feminism has changed in the last 50 years. If you took a feminist from the 1960s and you put her in a time-traveling machine to the modern day and you showed her what currently passes as feminism, she wouldn't believe it. I've got her in my time machine, I take her to the current day, and I show her interviews of pop stars who are dancing around on stage and in music videos dressed in barely anything, mimicking sex moves. And I tell her that these women are feminist icons doing it for female empowerment. Then I show her how women dress on a night out. I take her to nightclubs and she sees all the women in miniskirts and tight dresses and low-cut tops. And I tell her that any suggestion that these women should dress more modestly would now be considered chauvinistic. I show her Instagram and OnlyFans and tell her that there are women, even some of them teenagers, who are taking off their clothes for strangers on the internet and saying that they have never felt more empowered. The feminist from the 1960s would think that I'm playing some kind of practical joke on her. She's like, I'm not going to buy this. There's no way that this is real. This is a male fantasy world. You know, these women have reduced themselves to the level of sex objects just to appease the male gaze. No, I'm not buying it. There's no way that this could be considered female empowerment. And yet, this is what has happened. And as jarring as it may be to that original 1960s feminist who wanted women to enter the workplace and to have a life completely separate to men, you know, an existence that was meaningful and not defined by her relationship to men, this is what has happened. And what's more, I'd say it is entirely predictable, even inevitable. Feminism was always going to become a movement that fought for female freedom. You know, a woman's right to choose whatever life she wants. Whether you're a female CEO or a mother of 3 or an escort, feminism has your back, because in feminism, the merits of your choice isn't as important as the fact that as a woman, you have a choice. And so when all choices for women are equally valid under the guise of feminism, it's not a surprise what happens. It shouldn't shock anybody that human beings are pretty lazy and we are inclined to take shortcuts if they're available to us. This is a truth about humanity. Women are no exception to this. And even the original feminists shouldn't be surprised that some women just aren't interested in climbing the corporate ladder. They don't want to put in that amount of work. Having a successful career requires years of effort and study and hard work. And so what happens if you destigmatize the easier options, like taking your clothes off for strangers on the internet or marrying some rich older man and living off his wealth? It shouldn't be a surprise that lots of women will take those options. So perhaps being a trophy wife isn't as impressive as being a CEO. You don't have that respect, you don't have that status, but you do have access to a lot of wealth, and it came about a lot easier. If you feel tempted to criticize a woman's choice for being a prostitute or being a gold digger, be careful. Remember that this is a woman's choice, and feminism is about respecting a woman's choice. You don't want to be anti-feminist, do you? It doesn't matter what the choice is. The fact is that the woman made a choice, and that's what makes it empowering. Now, my prediction is that in the future, this exact same reasoning and logic is going to be applied in a movement to normalize polygamy. Women are going to want to destigmatize marrying one husband amongst lots of women. So here's my reasoning. Women are hypergamous, okay? So they want to marry the highest status mate that they can. They want him to be strong and handsome, which means that he has good genes, which will get passed on to their children. They also want him to be rich and successful so that he can provide for their children and also give her a luxurious lifestyle. Now, in Western society, every year that goes past, the gap between the winners and the losers of society gets bigger. Fewer and fewer men can claim to be at the top of the pyramid, whereas the number of men who feel like they're at the bottom of the pyramid continues to increase. In terms of resources, the rich men are ruling society and they create laws to protect that wealth. And so the rich are getting richer, but the poor people can't escape the inertia of poverty. This gap is also widening in terms of biology because good-looking men tend to marry good-looking women and they have children together, which means that the good-looking genes get all concentrated in those families, whereas ugly people are marrying other ugly people, creating ugly children, and the gap just gets bigger and bigger. So in practical terms, what this means is that there is this small percentage of men at the top of society who have the resources, the status, the good looks, and all of the women want to be with these guys, but they can't all have them. There's not enough guys to go around, and unfortunately, monogamy is the enforced social structure of our society, and any straying from that brings about some social stigma. The top status man takes a single wife, and all of the other women who wanted to be with him, they all have to settle for, lower to middle of the road men, all the while secretly wishing that they could have been desirable enough to get that guy. Now, for lots of women, monogamy will always be the preferred relationship structure because they like the feeling of having exclusive use of that one man's resources, and they like the fact that they exclusively get to enjoy his affection and his devotion. But
I think that's true. And I don't think actually, I think one argument against this whole thing is that I believe that there are women who are very much anti this. I think there are women who would absolutely not countenance this at all. Okay, this whole just playing devil's advocate here for a second. There are women that I know who just would not be having any of this, right? They would not. They would just be like, what, you mean I'm sharing this dude with other girls? No fucking way. I would not entertain that. So I do believe that. And I think this is one of the things where the sort of the difference between the rhetoric that we hear online versus the reality is there is a gap. However, we're talking about more overall generalized trends. And I think that he has got a point here.
There is also a sizable minority of women who look at the quality of men that they would have to settle for in monogamy and they think, that doesn't really interest me. He's not that attractive. He's not rich or powerful or have a lot of social status. Getting to enjoy his exclusive attention, that's not that appealing to me.
And that's the problem, isn't it? That's the problem, right? Because they're looking at these guys, they're looking at 80% of the guys or whatever the percentage is, and they're just not really feeling it, okay? And they don't have to feel it because they've got almost limitless choices and limitless access because of the apps and because of all the rest of it that we've talked about. So they look at the average Joe, and this is what we always talk about with this global dating marketplace stuff. It's like, okay, whereas before she may have ended up with, the bloke who ran the local cafe because he's a nice guy and he can provide and he's kind and whatever. Now she's looking at him and thinking, yeah, but look at Stavros on the yacht over here. I mean, that, this comparison, and what appears to be out there, what appears to be available to her, and what she could attain is making it very, very hard to then consolidate for many women on one individual dude.
But that super rich CEO or that movie star, he's really appealing to me. He's twice as good looking as most men. He's 50 times as wealthy and probably has like 1,000 times as much fame and influence. Sure, of course, I'd love to have him all to myself. But if I'm being honest, I would rather share that amazing guy with another woman than to have the exclusive attention of some chump. With this super high status guy, I get access to all of his wealth, all of his resources. My children are going to have his genes. Yes, it's less than ideal that I have to share him with other women, but think about how exciting my life will be. Now, what's important for you to realize is that there are already women who think like this, except that they have to settle for having affairs with already married men, and they risk an intense amount of social stigma for doing so. Enter the mindset of feminism. I'm a woman.
So that's the thing, isn't it? So the point that he's making here, and despite the naysayers in the chat who agree with my previous point, which is sort of pushing back slightly on this, the reality is that there are also a lot of women who are having affairs. So they might not be happy with this setup. They might not be happy with the fact that they're sharing the guy. And it may not be an official on paper thing, but in reality, they are sharing the guy. Okay, so as much as they might not want to do it, they certainly wouldn't want to make it official. They wouldn't want to tell their friends about it or shout it from the rooftops. But it is actually happening. That's the point he's making.
Woman, and this is my choice. Why should I feel ashamed? This is how I choose to empower myself. Can you see how this could start to occur? How women who have had to hide their choice to share a powerful, high-status man will begin to resent the fact that they have a social stigma attached to their choices, and they will begin a social movement to normalize it. I actually think that it's already begun. Now, of course, a word like polygamy, it's not got a good association with it. It sounds too patriarchal. There's too many negative connotations. It's like the word prostitute. Nobody thinks positively of prostitutes. But hey, let's rebrand it and call it sugar babies, and suddenly it's like this new exciting thing. That's okay. So let's not call it polygamy. Let's call it polyamory. Now, polyamory is a complex movement. I'm not trying to oversimplify it. Lots of people try polyamory for different reasons, and for some people at certain stages of their life, it is actually a sensible choice. But I believe that the groundwork for polygamy is right now being laid in the culture of polyamory. And I think that the seeds that are planted there will ultimately be the fruits that ripen. In fact, for anybody who has been paying attention to the culture of polyamory, you will see that one high-status man sharing 2 women is the most common common, the most celebrated relationship structure that there is. I actually think I can prove it. I set myself a little experiment. What I wanted to do was to go onto the polyamory subreddit, where sometimes people post photos of their polyamorous triads, 3 people in a relationship. If my theory is correct, I would say that the top voted posts of photos of people, 3 people in a relationship, I think the overwhelming majority of them are going to be 1 man, 2 women. Okay, let's see if I'm right. Let's look at the top 10 most popular photos from the last month. Okay, I've got the photos. You ready? All right, here we go. First one. 1 guy, 2 women. All right, that one's different. And there you have it. 8 out of the 10 most popular photos from the last month of poly triads had that dynamic of 1 man and 2 women. This is what I'm saying. The seeds for this are already being planted. And I don't think that it's a coincidence either that female bisexuality is on the rise. Remember these graphs from an earlier video? You can see that there has been an explosion of female bisexuality. The rate of increase is just incredible. Look at this graph. It used to be that female bisexuality sat at around 10%, but in 2015, it's at 40%, which means that now in 2020, it's probably even higher. And in this graph, you can see how much more common it is for women to have had a sexual experience with another woman. Now, I'm not saying that in a polygamous arrangement, the women have to be sexual with each other, but a certain degree of female bisexuality certainly makes the arrangement a lot more palatable. And what caused this increase in female bisexuality? Did women's biology rapidly change in the course of a couple of decades? No, of course not. What changed was societal attitudes. Homosexuality and bisexuality are a lot more accepted now, and women are responding to the culture. Us human beings, we like to think that our sexuality is untouchable, unchangeable, that somehow it's been divinely ordained, or it's just inbuilt into our biology. Our sexuality, our relationship structures, those are just set and they're never going to change. But that's just not true. We are highly social creatures, and our sexuality and our relationship structures will change based on changes in the culture. Some people will say, but haven't humans always been monogamous? Or they might flip it and they'll say, well, of course human beings will be polygamous. That's how we are in our natural state. Neither of those statements is true. Human sexuality and relationship structures have changed numerous times throughout human history. And if you look...
Yeah, okay, all right. So, look, interesting stuff. He makes quite a compelling case here. I think we've probably watched enough of that now, but he makes, again, this case that this is where things are heading. And even if it's not happening... So you've got to recognize the difference between, okay, this is an officially mainstream sanctioned thing and people are talking about it and it's out there, it's in the culture, versus, okay, but what's happening covertly? It's the old thing of like, don't listen to what people say, look at what they actually do, okay? And it would seem, you look at stats for infidelity and so on and so forth, it would seem that this is increasingly happening. Now, whether the women in those situations are happy with it, probably many of them aren't. I do agree with some of the comments in the chat who are saying, women would prefer, many women, maybe most women, he's talking about a sizable minority. Many women, of course, would ultimately, what they really want is the undivided attention of the super alpha guy who's going to be there and provide and all the rest of it. But what if she can't get that? What if the choice is not, okay, well, I just want that? What if the choice is, well, either I share that dude, or I share that dude and there's no questions asked, but I kind of share that dude, or I've got to marry boring Joe from down the road who I'm not really attracted to, I don't really want to be with, he's a boring chump, etc., etc. Okay, that's the problem, all right? That's the fundamental issue. And, whether this will come to pass in a big way or not, it remains to be seen. But I think it's an interesting thing to talk about. And as I say, it does seem to be being driven by women's raised expectations, which is a result of, firstly, the shifts in society that have, given them greater, earning power and ability to transcend socially, and also everything that's happened with the apps and everything that's happened with, Instagram and the connectivity that's created and so on and so forth. So interesting times, right? There's definitely something brewing here. And, and furthermore, this notion of the top percentile of guys getting all the action versus a much larger pool of guys who are getting not very much or substandard action or nothing at all, absolutely seems to bear out in real life as well as online, okay? And that's really what we need to find a solution to here. And the solution ultimately is self-improvement plus understanding female psychology plus becoming socially free, socially confident, and learning some riz, some charisma, or the ability to interact in a sexually kind of interesting, kind of exciting way when you're dealing with these women, okay? Because that's going to put you above 90% of other guys. We're going to finish in a second, but there's a couple of comments here. They're saying, okay, JDD, time is a big one. You use your time and attention. Yeah, of course, the more women that you're dating, the more time that takes up. Time is your most valuable asset. Has a high value man really got time for all that shit? Well, Probably not, but, you know, there again, I mean, many high-value guys are notoriously have had affairs. You know, they've had mistresses. People make time for this stuff. It's just one of the women, regrettably, is going to get less of his time than the other one. You know, that's what it comes down to. But if she loves him enough or she likes him enough, she'll hang around anyway. Most women would prefer to be single, alone, on SSRIs than share a guy. All the population, not data or marriage and birth rate shows this. Well, does it? I don't know. How does it show? Was there an option that they could tick to say, yeah, I'd rather share a guy? I don't know. I don't quite know how that data shows specifically that. I could be wrong. SJ, divorce where I push back is that most guys are not living it, but charlatans and marriage from their basement as house husband. I think Troy is the only one about it. Thank you, man. He's always a great supporter, SJ. He always supports me because he knows that you know, I'm out there talking the talk. I'm not just, you know, I'm not just sitting here behind a microphone coming up with this stuff. I'm actually out and about and doing this stuff, so I do know what I'm talking about. And also, I've coached a ton of guys as well in real life in different countries, so I see what's happening out there on the ground. You know, with women, you know, women in their 20s or early 30s, whatever, right? So I know absolutely what's going on out there. It's not some kind of charade. It's absolutely, you know, all based in what I've observed. It's interesting, though, to watch these other sources to see what people are saying and look at the data, but you need to sort of also filter that through a lens of what's actually happening out there. Abraham, can you teach guys to become Rizzlers? Absolutely. Email me, troy@realtroyfrancis.com. Of course, the Edge 3.0 is out at the moment. That does exactly that. And there'll be more videos on this channel as well about that. Fantastic question. Can you teach guys to improve their social skills? Well, absolutely. That's my job. That's what I've been doing. That's what I've been doing for the past 10 years. Of course I can. Now, whether every guy can improve their social skills, whether to the degree to which it can be taught, if that's your question, that's another thing. I certainly know what to teach them. I know how to teach it to them. I know what they should be doing. The degree to which they take it on and the consistency with which they practice it and the amount of time they actually spend on it is going to be the deciding factor. And unfortunately, what happens with some guys is they come in guns blazing going, yeah, I want to learn this stuff, and then they don't really take any action, and so they don't really get anywhere. There's no way round getting out there and getting the reps in, unfortunately. That's just what you have to do. But if they put in the work and they take on board feedback, then yeah, absolutely. Marriage birth rates are an all-time low. Women are not remarrying divorced chads or having kids with them. Well, right. Yeah, okay, fine. But I'm still not sure. What are the stats on would you be willing to share a high-value man? I don't know if there's ever been a study on that. Has there? I could be wrong. Anyway, listen, guys, I've got to leave it there because I'm actually going to go out into the field now with a guy and actually teach him some Riz. We're actually genuinely going to do it. So I need to call this one to a close. Thank you very much for tuning in. We're going to be back with more of this next week, okay? So give the video a like if you haven't already. Write a comment below. Share this out on your socials. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit notifications so you know when this stuff is coming up. And if there's anything you'd like me to cover, if there's any specific topics you want to see covered on here, write them in the comments below, or you can email me at troy@realtroyfrancis, and I'll see you guys again next Tuesday at 2 p.m. UK time or 9 a.m. EST. Bye-bye.